Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating concept that bridges the gap between ancient philosophy, modern corporate strategy, and global geopolitics. Okay, let's dive into this, because we're looking at something known as the bamboo principle.
Observe the bamboo during a storm. The mighty tree may break, but the bamboo bends and survives. This piece of wisdom from an ancient Zen master isn't just a nice poetic metaphor for a greeting card. It's actually a profound survival strategy. Think about a severe tempest for a second. The massive, deeply entrenched oak tree resists the wind with all its might, taking the full brutal force of the storm until, eventually, it cracks. But the bamboo? It yields. It bows gracefully right down to the earth, entirely flexible. And when the wind finally passes, it stands right back up.
So that brings us to the ultimate question for today's explainer. What can a simple plant actually teach us about surviving modern chaos? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. We're going to trace this idea all the way from the biological growth cycle of the plant itself, right into the boardrooms of the world's most successful companies, and finally, onto the world stage to see how entire nations are using this exact same framework to navigate huge geopolitical storms. Part 1. The 5-year secret, building the underground foundation. To really understand the bamboo, we have to start with how it grows, because the scale of delayed gratification happening here is just astounding. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights that massive underground preparation. If you plant a Chinese bamboo tree seed, you have to water it and fertilize it for a full year, and absolutely nothing happens above ground. Year 2, Year 3, Year 4 pass by, you're putting in all this constant work, and the soil looks completely bare. It looks dormant. But beneath the surface, the bamboo is building an incredibly complex, deep, and wide root system. Then, in Year 5, the magic happens. The bamboo suddenly bursts through the soil and grows up to 90 feet in just a matter of weeks. It's explosive growth, but it's fueled entirely by that hidden underground preparation.
And this biological reality maps perfectly onto how we build agile, high-performing teams. We're so often obsessed with visible progress, right? Immediate metrics, quarterly profits, those surface-level wins. But the bamboo teaches us to really value invisible progress. In organizational transformations, like adopting agile methodologies, for instance, the initial phases might not show a spike in delivery speed right away, because the team is building foundational strength. They're improving communication, establishing trust, creating tight feedback loops. You just have to trust the process. The growth is happening, it's just happening underground. When the foundation is finally set, that breakthrough in productivity feels like it happens overnight.
Part 2. Oak versus bamboo leadership, surviving the rigidity trap. Shifting from team mindsets into executive leadership, we generally see two types of organizations: oak tree leaders and bamboo leaders. Oak tree organizations, they're rigid, they're stubborn. They rely heavily on past successes and say things like, well, this is how we've always done it. When the winds of digital disruption hit, companies like Blockbuster and Kodak acted like oaks. Think about it. Kodak literally invented the digital camera back in 1975, but they were just too rigid to adapt their film-based business model, and they snapped. Bamboo organizations, on the other hand, are flexible. They adapt to the wind. Companies like Netflix and Singapore Airlines survive because they know exactly how to bend. Take Netflix back in 2011, for example. This is a perfect illustration of bending so far it feels like breaking. CEO Reed Hastings announced a highly controversial split of their DVD and streaming services, attempting to rebrand the DVD side as Quickster. And wow, the backlash was immediate and brutal. They lost hundreds of thousands of subscribers in weeks. But Netflix didn't rigidly hold their ground like an oak, nor did they completely abandon their vision of a streaming future. They bent. They listened to the feedback, scrapped the Quickster name entirely, but kept moving toward digital delivery. They endured that massive storm of criticism to position themselves for long-term survival, and today, they dominate the global market. They had deep roots in their vision, but total flexibility in their execution. Part 3. Bending without breaking. Frameworks for corporate flexibility. So how do leaders actually actively cultivate this bamboo-like flexibility within their teams? Because a resilient mindset isn't built in a crisis, it has to be cultivated in calm. Behavioral scientist Sam Sivarajan outlines 4 concrete strategies for building organizational bamboo. First up, practice productive paranoia, basically regular scenario planning. Ask your team, what storms are coming? What if our main supplier just vanishes tomorrow? Second, build experimentation into your DNA.
Run small tests so your team gets used to adapting long before a major crisis hits. Third, develop adaptive capacity at every single level, making employees totally comfortable with ambiguity. And fourth, create decision-making frameworks that allow you to act confidently even when you don't have perfect information.
And this brilliantly illustrates what that adaptive capacity looks like in practice. When the COVID-19 pandemic grounded the travel industry, Singapore Airlines faced a massive crisis with their cabin crew. But instead of rigid layoffs, they thought flexibly about their people's core skills: empathy, service, and high-stakes care. So they redeployed 300 cabin crew members to hospitals as care ambassadors. They bent with the storm, preserving their workforce's dignity and solving a critical community need at the exact same time.
Part 4. The Bamboo Diplomacy Strategy, Navigating the Winds of Geopolitics.
Now let's take this metaphor to a macro scale to see how entire nations use these principles to survive. Welcome to the concept of bamboo diplomacy, or Wai Zhao Kai Che in Vietnamese. Introduced formally in 2016 by the late General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, Nguyen Phu Trong, this is Vietnam's official foreign policy doctrine. And the strategy is exactly what it sounds like. It emphasizes the strong, unshakable roots of national independence and sovereignty, combined with flexible branches that adapt to the shifting, often turbulent winds of global geopolitics. In a world increasingly defined by competition between major superpowers, Vietnam uses this strategy to engage with everyone while avoiding getting entangled in rivalries.
So the crucial point is captured perfectly by the late Colonel General Nguyen Chi Vinh, who stated, "Vietnam is not neutral. Vietnam is independent." Being independent is utterly different from being neutral. You see, bamboo diplomacy is not a passive strategy of just hiding from the wind. It's an active, deeply rooted assertion of self-reliance. They maintain their core ethical and legal principles, those are the roots, while pragmatically adjusting their economic and diplomatic partnerships, which are the branches.
When we compare bamboo diplomacy to other historical balancing acts on the world stage, the differences really become clear. You have Swiss neutrality, which is a centuries-old strict avoidance of any military alliances. During the Cold War, India championed non-alignment to promote peace without joining a specific bloc. Finland used active neutrality to maintain their sovereignty right on the border of rival powers. Vietnam's bamboo diplomacy definitely shares DNA with these, but it is uniquely tailored to their own history and geography, prioritizing maximum national interest and economic integration without compromising their autonomy.
And from a purely strategic standpoint, the sheer scale of the results this flexible, pragmatic approach has yielded is absolutely staggering. Vietnam currently maintains diplomatic relations with an incredible 190 UN member states. They've established strategic partnerships with all 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. They've secured major economic boosts through massive free trade agreements like the CPTPP and EVFTA, and they're rapidly expanding into crucial sectors like semiconductors and the energy transition. By bending with the geopolitical winds, they've positioned themselves as a vital, highly connected player on the world stage.
Part 5. Building Interconnected Strength, the Power of the Grove.
This brings us to the final and perhaps most important anatomical trait of the plant to tie this whole explainer together. An individual bamboo stalk is impressive, sure, but a single stalk can still be vulnerable. In nature, bamboo rarely grows alone. It grows in a grove. And beneath the surface, all of those deep roots we talked about in year 1 through 4, they intertwine, they connect. When a massive storm hits a bamboo grove, the wind's force isn't taken by one stalk. The weight is distributed across the entire interconnected root system, making the grove nearly indestructible. Organizations and individuals survive the harshest winds by sharing collective strength rather than standing isolated.
Let's move to and see how this builds into real-world operational resilience. Toyota is legendary for its interconnected bamboo-like culture, specifically their 5 whys methodology. When a problem occurs, they don't just slap a Band-Aid on it. They ask why 5 times to drill down into the deep, interconnected root cause of the issue across the organization. They fix the system, not just the symptom. This allows the entire company to bend to accommodate the reality of a problem and then snap back significantly stronger, recovering rapidly.
This grove mentality is absolutely vital for modern professionals. If you're a solo practitioner or a small business running totally isolated operations, you're an oak tree just waiting for a storm. But if you build interdependent networks, for example, a financial advisor deeply connected with CPAs, estate attorneys, and insurance specialists, you create a grove. When market volatility hits or a client faces a complex crisis, you don't break alone. You share the weight, you bend together, and you support the client through your combined interconnected strength.
The bamboo doesn't fight the wind, it dances with it. It uses those years of quiet, invisible preparation to build deep roots, and relies on the strength of the grove to survive the unexpected. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to consider. Look at your own life, your team, or your business. What storms are you currently facing on the horizon? And when the wind finally hits, are you going to stand rigid like an oak, or are you going to adapt and bend like the bamboo? Thanks so much for learning with us today, and we'll see you in the next one.